What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the Acura Audio Garage. Today we are continuing our DIY Pro Series on our 2004 Acura TSX. If you don't know what the DIY Pro Series is, it's just a series designed to get you the most amount of information in the least amount of time so you can make a decision on what you want to do. Before we jump into the video, let's just get some quick questions out of the way. Can you replace the radio in your TSX with navigation? Yes. Can you replace the radio in your TSX that's a base like this? Yes. When you replace your radio, what will you lose? You will lose the navigation. If you use the dash kit that goes up here, you will lose the navigation route guidance. You will lose the navigation steering wheel control buttons. You always get to keep these buttons: volume up, volume down, next, previous, and mode. You get to keep all your speakers. If you use our accessories, we'll use the factory amp to keep your tweeters, your door speakers, your rear door speakers, and your rear deck speakers. Also, if you replace the radio, depending on what dash kit you use and what radio you're using, you might need to make permanent modifications to behind the dash. So there are tabs here that you might have to cut, etc. You're gonna have to watch out depending on what radio you are installing. All right, guys, with those basic questions covered, if you're sticking around, get ready because we got a lot to cover. This video took a lot of time and research to put together. So as a thanks to me, if you could give the video a like, subscribe, and share it, I'd really appreciate that. All right, guys, before we continue on to the next part, you just want to make sure you have your radio code. So if your radio is working, it's going to look like this. It's going to show the display. When your radio doesn't have the radio code, this is what it'll look like. It'll say the word code. If you put in any code that's not the right code, it's going to give you an error. If you do it too many times, it's going to give you... If you put in the code wrong too many times, it's just going to error out and it's going to lock the radio. So you want to make sure that you have the right code. There is no universal code. The code is specific to your radio. Your radio code can be in your glove box. It can be written here on the side. It's sometimes on the window door here. So you want to look for your radio code. If you don't have your radio code, you can get it by using the VIN number of your car and the serial number of the radio. To get the serial number, we're going to need to pull the radio out. You're not going to disconnect it. Remember, don't disconnect the radio yet. You're just going to pull it out, read the serial number off the top, go to the website, I'll put it here, put everything in, and they'll shoot you back your codes. If you have navigation, they can give you your other code as well. Just check I have two devices, or I need two codes, something like that. If you don't know your radio code, you can't put your factory radio back in. All right, now that we got the radio codes out of the way, let me talk to you about the tools you're going to need to complete the installation and to get that factory radio out. So you're going to need a Phillips screwdriver. I recommend two, a little one and a longer one. You're going to need some type of trim panel tool to get the trim off without damaging it. And then I recommend a ratchet with an 8mm socket to make your life easier, and also a magnetic pickup tool to make your life easier. This is optional, but most likely you're going to drop a screw, so just make sure you have one of these on hand so you can get that screw if it goes in a tricky place. Also not needed but optional is a cup like this. It's a magnetic cup, so it'll keep the screws in it in case you flip it, whatever. So those are the tools we're going to need. Now let's cover the parts we're going to need. Alright, guys, now for the parts you're going to need. You're going to need a dash kit, a wiring harness, a steering wheel control adapter if your radio requires it, and an antenna extension. So let's get into those parts. So the first is the dash kit. The dash kit, this is the eBay dash kit sold by Custom Parts Warehouse or something like that. Then we have the Metro dash kit. So this installs your radio below your factory radio. So this dash kit takes the position down here. The Metro dash kit takes the position up here. So the dash kit choice is up to you. The Metro dash kit comes with its own climate control that takes the place here. You can't use the factory climate control. With the Metro dash kit, you can't use the factory climate control, and that makes this dash kit a lot more expensive. So this dash kit's normally around 250 bucks. This dash kit's only 35. So the dash kit decision is up to you. The wiring harness is going to be the same. We'll talk about that in a second. The Metro dash kit comes with a wiring harness, but this is no good. It's made wrong. You can use it. You can complete the install with this, but I don't recommend it. So we covered the dash kit. Let's cover the harness. So we have a plug-and-play harness for the TSX. It's a T harness down to the extension for your radio. So this will make your installation plug-and-play. If you rather do the harness yourself, here are the parts you're going to need. So you're going to need the T harness, which is a 70-1721T. This is normally for the Honda Accord. We're going to need to unpin this and add some pins, and then the pins are going to come from the 70, 17, 25. So you're going to need both these harnesses and an pin and unpin tool. So you're going to need a pin tool to remove pins from one harness and add them to the other, and then you're going to wire all your harnesses together. We'll cover that later on, but I just want to mention it to you now. And then we have the antenna extension. This you're going to need. You can pick up from Metro, or we send it to you when you do the complete kit from us. The last piece you're going to need is the Access AXWC. It looks like this. It's a little black box. This is to keep your steering wheel controls. So if you don't care about your steering wheel controls, you won't need this, but if you do want to keep them, this is the last piece you're going to need. Something I will mention to you that's not here on our table is the Android screen, or the Android radio available for the TSX. So the TSX, if you look on Amazon, eBay, Alibaba, there is a screen that's Android based. It's plug and play. It works with the factory system. I'm not sure how well it works, how it integrates with your factory amplifier. I just have reports that it does work. And it takes this entire thing and gives you an all-in-one plug-and-play solution. It's like $700. So if you're ready to make that investment, that is up to you. If enough people request it, we might review that radio. But normally with the Chinese radios, they're always hit and miss. They always have like little bugs and stuff. But if you're looking for information on that, I recommend scouring YouTube or the internet. We're not going to have first-hand knowledge on that radio, so if that's something you're looking at, you might want to look elsewhere. For our installation in this video, we're going to be using the eBay dash kit because of the cost difference. We will cover the Metro dash kit in another video, but for this video, we're going to continue forward with the eBay dash kit. All right, guys, before we jump into disassembly, I just want to talk to you about the power circuits, or the circuitry inside the car that makes that factory radio and factory amplifier work. So really what I want to talk to you about is fuses. So you have 3 fuses, 4 fuses if you have navigation, but 3 primary fuses. One is constant power for the amplifier. That's going to be fuse number 5. It's going to be a 20 amp fuse. Then you have constant power for the radio, which is fuse 6, which is a 10 amp fuse. And then you have your ACC fuse, which is what turns the radio on and off, which is 7.5, and that's fuse 32. So let me just show you where those fuses are. Fuse box is in the driver's kick panel. It is right here. It is right there. And again, we're looking at fuse 5, fuse 6, fuse 7, and fuse 32. The reason why I bring those fuses up is because if you install your radio and you end up with no sound, the radio not turning on, you need to check those fuses out. It's very common for someone who is installing to cause a short and then blow one of those fuses, and then they go to put the new radio in and the new radio is not working. So those are the 3 or 4 fuses you need to work about. Those are the 3 or 4 fuses you need to worry about. And the other thing when it comes to power is it's also common for installers or like DIYers for some reason to drain their battery during installation. So you already have a weak battery, you're turning the car on and off, you're leaving things open, whatever, your battery drains. So at some point you're installing your radio, you test fit it, the radio turns on, you put everything back, it's not turning on anymore. You're like, what the hell, what happened? And you don't think, hey, maybe I should crank the car, maybe this, maybe that. Instead, you just start taking stuff apart and nothing's working. So if that happens to you, your radio was turning on, it's not turning on anymore, try to crank your car. If you just get that means your battery is drained. So you need to charge your battery. Your car will turn off accessories in the car if your battery is dead or dying. So that's something you need to be aware of as well. One last thing about power, the fuse number 7 is responsible for turning on the screen with your navigation. So if your navigation screen is completely black and there's nothing going on, you want to check fuse number 7. It should at least say, please check disk if it's not functioning, but it has power. And that fuse number 7 powers this screen and the DVD-ROM in the trunk. So if that fuse is no good, you're gonna have nothing on your navigation display. The last part before we jump into disassembly is just the factory amplifier. So the factory amplifier in your TSX powers all of your speakers. If you're gonna replace your radio, our harness allows you to use the factory amplifier to keep all of your speakers. If you wanna bypass that factory amplifier, you can. We have the harness to do so. If you wanna install an aftermarket radio and bypass that amplifier, you can, but you have to make a choice on which speakers you're gonna keep. So you have a total of 8 speakers. You have 4 door speakers, 2 tweeters, 2 rear speakers. Your radio is only gonna have an output of 4. So we'll have 4 channel output, meaning you can select 4 of those 8 to keep, you can kind of like bridge together and make it work if you know what you're doing. But if you don't know what you're doing, I don't recommend going that route. I recommend installing either another amplifier in place of the factory amplifier or using one of our plug and play amps to make it easy. Okay, if you're watching this video trying to decide whether to change your radio or your amplifier because one of them is giving lousy sound or you're getting low sound or bad sound, know that the radio and the amplifier both fail in this car. So on the TL, it's normally always the amplifier. On the TSX, the amplifier is made by Pioneer. It's pretty solid, but it does fail. And the radio does fail occasionally. So it's hard to diagnose which is wrong. You're kind of replacing one at a time until you get your sound back. And unfortunately, that's just the case with this car. So if you're wondering, hey, my sound isn't right, what is wrong? I would start with the amplifier because it's the easiest to disconnect and plug in, and then go to the radio. Also, if you have a component that doesn't work, let's say your navigation doesn't work, your climate control doesn't work, or some part of your system doesn't work, installing a new radio isn't going to make it work. If it was working before, it will keep working. If it's not working now, installing a new radio will not make it work. All right, before I continue the video, let me just save you some money, because this is going to be a choice that you have to make. And if you make the bad choice, it's going to cost you a lot of time and a lot of money. So here are the two dash kits you can use. Here are some of the radios you can use. So if you want a single DIN, if you want a double DIN, this is those cheap Chinese double DINs. We'll talk about that in a second. Here we have a Sony AX3200. Here we have a BE7ACP. And here we have an ILX W650. When you are selecting a radio, there isn't much room behind the dash, whether you go in the pocket or up here. You see why this sticks out further than normal is because there's not enough room back there. So back in the day, you had to cut. You still might have to cut depending on which radio you're installing. My recommendation, if you're doing a single DIN, find a small chassis like this. You're going to need the 4 RCA ports for the harness. We'll cover that later on. And you're going to need it to be slim so that it easily fits in terms of thickness back there. You can see compared to that, it's even smaller than the dash kit, so it will work. If you choose something really bulky, really long, something that's going to exceed the length of my hand to there, so like a Pioneer AVH 1500 NEX. That's the Pioneer with the DVD player and CarPlay. That's going to be too big. It's going to make installation really annoying. You're going to have to cut your inside of your dash. So instead, choose something like this BE7ACP that's a lot slimmer, or like the ILX W650 that's even slimmer than that. If you are doing the exact install we are doing, then you actually might even want to use the AX3200. I know it's not as thin as the other ones, but because of the layout of this radio, when you slide it into place, what needs to end up getting cut is back here where this area is cut already. There are tabs there that end up being cut. But because this radio has no bottom area there, you don't have to cut anything. So save yourself some money, pick the right radio. You can't go wrong with the Sony. You want the ILX or the BE7ACP. If you're gonna go with a traditional full-size double DIN, just know that it might cause you some pain. Also, when it comes to radio selection, you're going to want those 4 audio RCA ports. So you see these has 6 ports, but 4 are yellow. This is no good. You want something like this with the 4 audio RCA ports. Lastly, when it comes to fitment, your bigger, bulkier radios aren't going to fit properly in the dash kit. You see the volume knob is touching there. It just doesn't slide into place. So this is the big, bulky eBay, Amazon radio. The cheap one is like $70. If your radio is under $100, I want to say it's not going to work correctly. Here's the AX3200. You see how much better that fits? And then let me show you the single DIN. So you need, let me get that over. You need something slim like this that's going to fit in there properly, just like that. And then here will go a pocket. I don't have the pocket right now, but that's how this would install. And then the BE7ACP, also the same thing. It sits flush. So remember, if you're using a cheap radio, it's not going to fit right. And then if you're using the Metro dash kit, the Metro dash kit's a little bit more forgiving. You can see there's some gaps there. We'll try that cheap radio again. So yeah, even on the Metro dash kit with a little bit more forgiving, the cheap radio just doesn't make it. So you want to stick to something name brand, or you want to get the dimensions of this from the specifications on their listings to verify that your radio is going to fit correctly. If you don't want to go through the hassle of figuring out which radio will work, all your wiring, pinning, unpinning, things like that, we do have complete kits and complete radio kits available. So the difference there is that the radio kits, the complete radio kits, come with the radio. So you can choose the Sony, you can choose the Alpine, you can choose the Boss. The complete kit just comes with your dash kit, a wired harness, all you have to do is plug everything in, the antenna extension, and the AXWC. So if you want to simplify your install, you can visit our website, Acura Audio Garage, and all these stuff will be listed there. If you don't mind doing your own wiring, then stay tuned. We'll cover that right after the disassembly. All right, guys, so the disassembly is actually the easiest part, I would say. Getting your radio out isn't too complicated. You just have to be careful when you're prying on stuff. So the first things first, if you want a quick win, make sure you know you're heading on the right page. This pocket right here actually just pulls out. You're just going to grab it firmly, pull on it, and it should come out. So yeah, guys, once you pull that, it'll come towards you, and then you can just lift up and out. Be careful, ours is broken, but there is a light here, so if you need to change it into park to get more space, feel free to do that. But here's the little light. Normally you would just twist this out. There'd be a housing here for you to twist it out of, and you could leave it disconnected and the pocket just comes out just like that. All right, so for the next part, after we do that, we're just gonna put our cup holders out. To pull our cup holders, you can kind of pull here and at the brake with your fingers. So let me see if I can set that up. Fingers right here where my cup holders are, and I'm gonna start lifting up. And be careful, you can break this. So I know that all came in one piece, but in reality, you want to do what I did, pull. That should have lifted up one of the edges, and then you'll pry the rest of the edges up. There is tabs all over. So we're gonna come up and over the shift, the gear shift, and then we have connectors here that we have to disconnect. This tab is actually broken on this connector, so I had to use my pry tool. And then on the other side, I just have a little blue tab I have to press. All right, so you want to be careful with this. This can easily break. Here are the tabs I'm referring to. So if you pry along the edges, you'll release these. This is very dirty and it stinks. This car was dirty when we got it, and we tried our best to clean it, but we didn't do a deep detail. So then to disconnect these, our tab is broken on this one, so we weren't able to just press it down. But normally you can just press this little tab down and pull the connector out. So now we got the cup holders out and we have our heaters disconnected. We're going to work on this piece. This piece has 4 screws, one here, one back there, and one back there. Let me just show you that with better light. So there's a screw there, and 2 back there. Our screws are missing because this obviously has been messed with before, but you will have 4 screws where I showed you. Okay, so we're gonna get our screws out. Just a screw here in our cup holder. And then we have 2 more screws here, which we don't have. You'll take those 2 screws out, and then you'll be able to pull this up and away. You'll then have connected back here on like ours, so this will be really tight. You're gonna wanna press this down, this clip, and it's at the top, not at the bottom. So you press the clip down and it should be able to release. Then you'll be able to free this out. Once this is disconnected, we just put it off to the side. Now we can get started on the rest of the trim. Now we want to go to the sides and the top. So the sides are pretty easy. You're just going to get underneath them. You want to use your pry tool here. You want to pry from an edge like I am and just try to get underneath. There we go. So I got it started. I got it out. This doesn't need to come fully out. You can leave this right here because you just need to get to this screw point. And for this one's the same thing. It's actually easier to get started on the edge. So let me show you that. So you come right here to this edge and you pry from the back. And then we're gonna go underneath as we pry. This is easy to break, so be careful. You don't want to break it. You're just gonna use your trim panel tool to pop it out. There we go. So here are the clips that you're removing, and oh, my edge one was actually broken. That's why it was so easy. But it is easier to start here and then move to the side. So we'll put this to the side, And now we freed up this screw. Now there's another screw behind this cover. So to get this off, you're just gonna stick your pry tool behind it. It's gonna slide forward. You'll just disconnect it. It's a tab connector. And there's a screw up here. So I'm gonna get those screws now. One here behind this. All right, so now that we got all those screws out, we need to get two hidden screws that you can't see right now. So those two screws are actually up here. They're behind this edge. So you have two screws in here. They're kind of hard to see. I'll see if I can get my finger on them. They're right here where my finger is. It's very low, but it's there and on the opposite side. There are 8 millimeters, so this is where I said your ratchet would come in handy, or you could use a small screwdriver like this. It's up to you. I like to get them started with this and then use this ratchet to finish them up. All right, so I'm gonna get these started. I'm gonna use my little Phillips. I'm just gonna feel for them. All right, so I can feel one. I'm getting it started. If you're wondering, this is where your factory amplifier is, by the way. It's right here. All right, guys, so now once we have those screws off, you can actually just grow underneath and pull the radio towards you. This is like the easiest way to get it out. So you can stick your hand, you can go all the way behind the radio, and then you're just gonna push it forward. That will loosen it up some, and now we can grab it from the sides and pop out the top. I'm just gonna use my trim panel tool here on the edge. You wanna be careful because this material is very soft, so you don't want to use anything too hard that's gonna like actually damage it. The pry tool is just hard enough where it might crease or dent it, but it's not gonna damage it fully. Okay. All right, so now we got it out. We're gonna slide it forward. We gotta lift up and forward, and now we have some connections here that we have to deal with. So in the back we have 3 connections for the climate control, and they're all just tabs that you would push down on and release. So they're all the same. Tab here, and you just pull back and release. And then for our radio, we actually have just one plug since we're working on 2004. Have a 2007, 2008 TSX, you'll have more plugs back here, but because we only have a 2004, we only have this one plug. All right, if you couldn't find your radio code before, here is the number you're looking for. So here's the serial number. Don't disconnect your radio yet. Take that and your VIN number, head over to the website, put everything in, and get your radio code back. Here you can see someone actually wrote it on the radio for us, so if we ever pulled the radio, we would know it. So make sure you do that before you proceed with the installation. Okay, the last item we had to disconnect was the blue plug. It has a tab as well. You're just pulling the tab, pulling it back, and then we just have a regular antenna. So we're gonna need the antenna extension, like I mentioned, but this is the regular antenna you're gonna pull out the back. Just quick, a little bit about radios. So this doesn't have the original radio that came with the car. So you can see we have 3 connectors up there, 3 connectors down here, and 1 more. If we had navigation, we'd actually have 1 more up here in the middle. So there are, when you replace the radio, you only use this connector, and this connector. This one does not work, this one does not work, this no longer works, and the navigation one no longer works. So what that looks like in the car, the ones you work with are this one, and this. A lot of people get confused when there's extra connections that they don't use, so I just want to cover that now. There are, if you replace a radio, what we're doing, we're going to only use this one, but if you're using the Metro Dash kit, you're going to use those 2. The rest will stay disconnected. You're probably going to be a little upset with me, but you don't need to do all this if you're just installing the same radio slash dash kit slash kit we're installing. You just needed to loosen the radio and move it forward, because we just needed to disconnect this and disconnect this, and we could have done both of those without pulling the radio all the way. But this just makes your installation easier and more complete for you to work wires and everything. So I recommend doing it this way. If you do it the other way, you can get it done, but it's just a little bit more troublesome when you're running the mic or the USB, etc. All right, guys, for our installation, I don't need to fully remove the radio, so I'm just going to slide it forward like I said, and I'm just going to leave it in place while we take care of the wiring. Alright guys, since we're using the eBay dash kit, is pretty simple to put together. It comes with the 2 mounting brackets and 6 screws. So you screw it down on the side here, 2 up there, 1 down there, 2 up there, 1 down there. You do need to transfer the mounting tabs from the other pocket to this one. So here, this mounting tab, they're usually up here, but ours was missing them to begin with, but you can grab these as well. So you'll need to transfer those, and then your dash kit's really ready. It also has 2 hooks right here. Ours are broken, but just know that this is essentially the dash kit. We're actually going to trim it up a bit in a little bit just to show you how we're going to install it. But all right, let's jump into the wiring. What we have to do is we have to take the RCAs and the black wire out of this and add them to here, and we have to remove these speaker wires from here and just leave them disconnected. So first things first is we're going to pop this open. You're just going to lift here, so both of these are out. And now before I start removing stuff from this one, I'm just going to unpin the wires I need here. So for here, with your pin tool, you're going to grab your black. You're just going to remove it like so. It'll just come right out. And then we're going to add our black opposite our other black, which is right here. This is our steering wheel control ground. So once that's in there, make sure it goes in straight. You should hear it click in place. Wheel control ground. Once that's in there good, we'll move on to the other colors. So we want to grab all our RCAs out. We're going to grab all our negatives are on the bottom row, all our positives on the top row, and white is closest to orange. So you can remember when you do that, it's going to go white, gray, green, purple. But all right, let's start by unpinning whatever's easiest, really. So we'll start on this edge. We'll start with this purple. After some time and trouble, we were able to get them out. Remember, you're just going to stick your pry tool in the little hole and try to lift the tab up. It's going to be annoying, but you can get it done. That frees up our RCAs. Now what we got to do is we got to remove the speaker wires, which are these 8 wires here, from our harness. That's pretty, and this I feel like it's going to be a lot easier. I'll show you, just because this style connector is a little bit different and it's a little bit more forgiving. So there you go, there goes one. Okay, so now all of those are out. We're actually going to add another wire to this. So we're going to take our gray wire, so the gray wire we just took out, we're going to put it in this slot right here. So right next to the red, we're going to put our gray wire, and it should just slide into place. You just want to make sure it comes in straight. So that's good. Our gray wire's in. This is for our steering wheel control. So this is our steering wheel control ground. This is our steering wheel control remote. And now we have to add our RCAs. Alright guys, so after we took the RCAs out of here, we added them to here. We also added a black wire and a gray wire for our steering wheel controls. And now we have to match up all our wires. So we're going to be connecting all of these wires here to our aftermarket radio, and that's what's going to power our radio and allow us to create our T-harness. We're also going to need to add one more part. So the AXWC comes with a wiring harness. We're going to grab that wiring harness now. Alright, so now our harness with our AXWC1, we only need 3 wires from it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the wires I don't need. You can just tape them up, cut them, whatever you want to do. The wires you do need are gray, red, which is on the bottom here, black and red, along with this little headphone jack connector. So what I'm going to do is these pull out pretty easy. I'm just going to pull them out. I'm just going to grab my sweater, because when you pull it out, it can grab your skin. So they're pretty easy to pull out. You're just pulling out the ones you don't need. Now I'm just going to add a few zip ties to ease the tension on some of our wiring. So right here, I don't like too much tension on these little white and red wires, so I always add a zip tie. And then here, I don't like too much tension on the RCAs, so I always add a zip tie. I always actually bulk them up like that a little bit, and then make sure there's no pressure on them. So here's the harness for our Sony radio. We're just going to remove what we don't need. The parking brake on the Sony can go straight to ground, so I don't need this long wire. I'm just going to cut it short. I'm going to cut my black short because I don't need it to be extra long. We are going to need this blue-white, so I'm going to remove this. Jesus. Reverse, if you're doing a backup camera, that's the wire you would need to send 12 volts to. And then to make it less confusing, I'm going to unpin my speaker connections, because I'm not going high power out of this. The way my speakers are going to get audio signal is through these RCAs to the back of the radio. So these speaker connections aren't going to be in the harness. We're going to remove them. Okay, now with all our speaker connections out of the way, you can see it makes our harness a lot easier to look at. So my Sony harness doesn't need a parking brake. I just twist my green and black together. If you're doing a Pioneer, you're going to need a parking brake bypass. Kenwood, you're going to need a parking brake bypass. Alpine, you're going to need one. Boss, Sony, you don't need one. So now I'm going to wire everything together. I'm going to show you the wires once I have them connected. I'm not going to do a lapse on the wiring. So I'm just going to strip. Here we solder at Acura Audio Garage. If you're at home, you can always use these crimps. I'm not totally against these. I'd rather solder, but you can twist the wires together and crimp them together with this. It'll make it easier. So our harness is complete. I'm just going to run you through the wiring again. So remember, we first had to transfer pins from one location to the other, and now we were able to wire it together. So on the Sony side, yellow goes to yellow, orange goes to orange, blue, white goes to blue. If you're adding subs or aftermarket amps, this is the wire you're going to tap for your remote turn on. Gray, white goes to gray. All your blacks go together, so it's 3 blacks, one here, and one from the AXWC. And then the black and the green from the Sony go together. So let me get you a better shot of that. So it's 3 blacks to 2, one's black, one's green. Then it goes 2 reds to 1, and everything else is single. Pretty straightforward wiring. It's just the only part that was annoying is unpinning and repinning things. So this is going to plug into the factory radio. This is where the factory radio plug is going to go. This is now going to plug in to our Sony. And then our RCAs are going to plug in to our Sony. So white is front left. Gray is up front right. Green is rear left. And purple is green rear right. Black here is sub. We then have to go set up our microphone. We'll cover that next. And then we need our antenna extension plugs into here, and then this plugs into our antenna. That really covers it for the wiring. We're going to test everything in the car before we move forward. The other thing I just want to cover real quick, if you're using a radio that doesn't have 4 RCA ports, you're out of luck. So a radio like this won't work. You could use Y splitters to turn these 2 into 4, but I just recommend using a radio with 4. Alright guys, so it's hard to see, but our blue plug is right here, and our antenna is right there. So we're going to install our T-harness. We're going to plug this blue plug into here, and then we're going to plug this blue plug back into the back of the radio. Right now, for our testing purposes, we only need to hook this up. It's a quick thing. Our AXWC is not plugged in, but the steering wheel control input for the Sony is right there. It's not the red port, it's the blue port. So now our radio's plugged in. We're just going to test it, make sure we have sound, and then we're going to plug our steering wheel controls in and map the steering wheel controls. Alright guys, so now we're just going to test our radio. So we should have power in a couple of seconds. There we go, Sony. Alright, nice. Okay, let's hear the radio. Okay, let's go now. Okay, nice.
You know, to each their own. That's a really good guess.
Go,
I love it because this is actually a pretty common.
So we have power, we have sound. Sounds really good. Let's program our steering wheel controls. Steering wheel controls, we're going to turn the radio on. Our ASWC will flash red and green really fast. We're going to hold volume up on the steering wheel. Our ASWC is going to go through a series of green flashes. Then it's going to go through a series of red flashes, and eventually it will go solid red. So now you can see it's solid red. I'm going to try my steering wheel control buttons. I'm going to let go of volume up, and now I'm going to hit mode. So you see it changes to Bluetooth, AV in, USB. I'm going back to the radio. Now I'm going to do volume up. Now I'm going to do volume down, next, and previous. So all our steering wheel controls are all our steering wheel control buttons are working. If you have other buttons here on the steering wheel, they will not work with your aftermarket radio. So now that that's all set up, I'm gonna run our microphone and our USB. I'll show you how to do that, and then we'll mount the radio in its place. So you want to mount your microphone where nothing's gonna get in the way. Let me show you a couple spots. So if you're okay with it, you could mount it here. I wouldn't mount it down low, like down here or something. It would get in the way. Normally what we do is we mount it right here in this corner. So if you want, there are two ways to run the wire. You can release this rubber by pulling it down, and then you can snake your wire into this little gap. So you'll put it in the little gap. It'll hold just enough. You'll push the rubber back in. It'll conceal the wire, and you can run the wiring down. What we like to do is pop this panel off. So we'll pop this entire panel off. We'll put this over here. We'll zip tie it in place and run it down and to behind the radio. But I'm gonna do it the proper way. You could do it whichever way you want, but I usually put my microphone up here. You can put it up here. There really is no difference. It's up to you where you want to put it. I have seen actually in a TL we hit it up here, but it's kind of silly. I mean, it's up to you. I would just put it where it's in line of sight, and when you need it, you can use it. All right, the first part of getting this pillar off is getting the side air curtain clip out. I just use a screwdriver. You want to be very careful. You want to nudge it out, then you can fully remove it. After that's gone, you can just pull it out pretty easy, and then lift up and towards you. That then gives you the ability to run your wire and zip tie it to this. All right, now I've got my microphone mounted. It just slides onto this actual headliner, and then I have it zip tied. You can see my zip tie right there and going down. Then the rest of the wire you have to get to behind the radio. So you could do two things. You could use a snake and slide it down there, or you can pull this apart and shove the wire into this little crevice and then come all the way down and around. The reason why I recommend doing it this way and zip tying, so you stay out of the way of the airbag. When you just slide it in here, you could possibly get in the way of the airbag a little bit. I don't know, that's argumentative, up to you. I do like to leave a little bit of slack here in case I ever need to pull the mic down, and then also so that I can hide the wire really nice, just like that. So now you don't see the wire, you barely see the mic unless you're looking for it. And to install this, we're just gonna slide. It has two tabs. You slide those two tabs into place, and then we can put this back where it goes. The only thing is the clip. You're just gonna slide it back, make sure it's facing the right orientation, slide it back into place, and there you go. Now I'm going to just tuck my wire underneath this. So there you go, like that. Now my wire is fully underneath. Now I'm gonna put my rubber back. This rubber is okay to come off and on. It's not really a big deal. You just want to make sure when you put it back on that it's fully seated. You don't want to have any edges like this. You see, like this edge isn't fully seated because of the way I put it on. So I want to make sure. I must have some slack. Yeah, I have some slack there. There you go. There we go. Now it's where it's supposed to be. Now my wire is right here. I'm just gonna run it to behind my radio. I'll show you with a light. It's pretty simple once you have the radio out like we do. So there you go, guys. Here's where I ran my wire. You can see it. And it's just hanging loose right now. I'm gonna zip tie it in place. But there you go. That's how you would run your microphone. So then on this side, it comes out that back left edge, and we're just gonna zip tie it in place. So we ran our microphone. We zip tied it in place. Now we have to plug our radio in, and then we're going to disconnect the radio, mount it on our dash kit, and put everything back together. So let me get started with that. Right now I'm just going to disconnect everything from this radio. I'm going to plug the other blue plug. I'm going to plug this blue plug now into the back of the factory radio and get everything situated. Crazy tight. You just don't want the radio to move from you pushing it. Now, let me show you what I was talking about in the dash. That's going to be a problem that you'll have to remove if we don't trim this. Normally, because the pocket can't fit unless we trim here and here. But what I'm hoping with the Sony radio, we won't have to trim this. We'll be able to just make it slide in. One quick thing, don't forget to transfer the little plastic tabs from the pocket, because this pocket isn't going back in, to your dash kit. Alright, so we got those transferred. Now what we need to do is we're just going to cut this right here on both sides. Alright, so we trimmed up our dash kit. We just cut that extra plastic off with a flush cutter. And now we're going to hook everything up. Remember, we already plugged our radio back in, so all our connections are down here. We're going to hook up our RCAs, the red mic import port for the microphone, the blue for the AXWC. That AVN stays blank, that Sirius XM port stays blank, and then your antenna. Alright guys, to get the radio to fit, you're going to need to cut those edges. So let's see if I can get you better. So this right here, you need to just slice, and this right here on the opposite side you'll need to slice. They're just little tabs. This modification will still allow you to put the factory pocket back in. It's just the mounting tabs for that pocket. So we have everything hooked up, all our RCAs, our microphone, steering wheel control, power. We're gonna just run our USB down below real quick, and then we're gonna slide everything into place. When you slide the dash kit into place, it's very hard to remove it again. So be ready to put this thing in there and to leave it in there. If you need to remove it, it is possible, but it's just very annoying because of this cover right here. Got the radio back in. Everything's sitting nice and flush. I'm just gonna screw my screws here down. This is very tight. It's gonna fit a little better once you put the cups back. The plastic is malleable, so just be careful. You don't want to be too rough with it, but it will take the radio. Your two mounting screws will line up, and you can screw the radio down. We're just going to try everything one more time before we put the rest of our screws back. So for you, this might be too low, but I actually think it complements the car well. Especially if you have a manual, it's nicely right there. But I think it's in a good spot. I like how it came out. I like how it sounds a lot. Speakers are working they're supposed to be the way they're supposed to. Now I can put everything back together. So to put everything back together, we're gonna put our screws here, screw up here. There's two screws we're not using now, and then we can put this back in place. Holders. Just want to slide it over, hook up the one on the right, hook up the one on the left. Now we're just gonna knock it into place. Part is just setting this down, making sure it fits good. The radio fits good, it's not moving, looks good. Now we're gonna click our trims pieces back in. So that trim piece is back in. We're gonna do our other trim piece. These just snap in, so they're real easy. And then we just have to do the top hazard button. So the top hazard button, you're just gonna click it in, and then you're just gonna push it into its slot, and there you go. So here it is, guys. Remember, factory radio plugged in, no audio. Aftermarket radio supplies all the audio. Steering wheel controls work on the aftermarket radio. Your climate control still works as it should. You use the factory climate control, no problem. You can turn it off. This is pretty much useless now. Your radio's down here. This is a Sony AX3200. So we get Android Auto, Apple CarPlay. We ran our USB to right here, so I'm gonna plug it in. So there we go. Apple CarPlay now working. I mean Android Auto not working. Here we have our YouTube music, and then our microphone works. Hey Google, what time is it? All right, guys, that's gonna wrap up the video. We installed the double DIN in our TSX. We used the dash kit that goes below the factory radio. If you're having issues, stick around after this outro because we're gonna address some of the common questions. If you made it this far, you watched the entire video, I thank you. Make sure you like, subscribe, share the video. We always have more content coming, especially DIY Pro Series on TSX, so you wanna stay tuned. But all right, guys, let's move forward to the questions. So let's say you install your radio. Now you have the radio's not turning on. You have no sound, etc. Check the fuses. So we covered the fuses in the beginning: fuse 5, fuse 6, fuse 7, and fuse 32. Check all those fuses. If one of them is bad, there's your problem. The other issue you can run into is, hey, I installed the radio. Now I have hissing, humming, ringing, some sort of noise. The Sony is very good with not generating noise. It's either your factory amplifier, something wrong with your speakers, the harness you created. If it's a harness from us, feel free to reach out to us and we'll take care of the problem. There's something going on there between your car and the radio. The way to test that is you can just unplug one RCA at a time. If you still have the noise with all the RCAs unplugged, sorry to say it, it's probably your amplifier. If you only get the one, then you could start plugging in an RCA one at a time and figure out which one's hissing or whatever. If it's all of them, then there's maybe something wrong with the harness or with the RCAs themselves. On cheaper radios, so like if you did an Amazon radio, you will sometimes have hissing because when you connect the RCA, because of the poor grounding of the Amazon radio. So then you'll have to wrap the RCAs in ground or use a ground loop isolator. I'll throw a picture up and a part number for you if you need that. Next one you could run into is the radio turning on and off, etc. Power issues. Basically, you turn the car on, the radio turns on, turns off. There's something with your wiring there. So if your fuses are fine, something went wrong with your wiring, a pin's not sitting correctly, something's not sitting correctly, so you want to verify that your wiring is all good. We recommend soldering or crimping. Don't just twist together and tape. That's not going to hold. One that is common is I want to run aftermarket subs with this setup. Can you? Yes, you can. You'll tap the blue white wire I showed you earlier for your remote turn on and run your RCA straight to the back of the radio. If you chose a Sony or a radio with enough RCA ports, you'll have the 4 that the harness took up and you'll have 2 for a sub. If you're trying to run multiple amps, you're not going to use the RCAs that came with the harness. You're just going to use the RCAs that go to your amps. That's like a complex situation. So if you're running multiple amps and you have hissing, you have noise, that's something you're going to have to handle on your own. It's not something we're going to be able to help you. We work with the factory system. You can stop by and we can handle it in store, but we won't be able to help you over the phone or on the internet. You're going to want to stop by your local car audio shop to make sure they can help you figure out where the issue's going on. The last one I can think of is you have poor sound quality. So like you didn't have that good sound with the factory radio, so you decided to switch it and now you don't have good sound either way. It's your factory amplifier that's bad. You can replace the factory amplifier with one of our plug and play amps. You can hardwire the aftermarket radio to bypass the factory amplifier and just use it to the factory speakers, or you can install your own aftermarket amplifier. It's up to you. Some bonus content for you in case you need it. Your FM antenna lines work off these defroster lines. Your FM antenna booster, so you know radio signal, is in this pillar right here. You pop that off, you can get to the booster. There is no turn on for the antenna behind the radio. It just turns on when you turn the car on and off, so there's no wire back there that you have to hook up. The blue white wire behind the radio is to turn the factory amp on and off.